Want to tell people where we're continuing?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. We're going to start back up in the middle of page 156. For those of you who are here with us, I think we're still waiting on a bunch of people to rejoin. I'm so sorry about this. I think, especially if this happens again, but even if it doesn't, I may end up just sending you all my sermon for this evening instead of making you all stick around super late tonight. Let's see how the rest of it goes. But for now, let's join back together in the middle of page 156. And I am just so grateful for all of you sticking with us and being really, really patient. I see that we have 43 people here. I see you commenting. You all are awesome. The middle of page 156, we sing together. Ve'al kulam Elohim selichot Salach lanu mechalanu Salach lanu mechalanu Kapelanu. I'd like to invite Aaron and Justin Fry Sosny to lead us in a prayer by Marion Wright Edelman.
O God, forgive our rich nation where small babies die of cold quite legally.
O God, forgive our rich nation where small children suffer from hunger quite legally.
O God, forgive our rich nation where toddlers and school children die from guns sold quite legally.
O God, forgive our rich nation that lets children be the poorest group of citizens quite legally.
O God, forgive our rich nation that lets the rich continue to get more at the expense of the poor quite legally.
O God, forgive our rich nation which thinks security rests in missiles rather than in mothers, and in bombs rather than in babies.
O God, forgive our rich nation for not giving you sufficient thanks by giving to others their daily bread.
O God, help us never to confuse what is quite legal with what is just and right in your name.
We have confronted the wrongs we have committed, and now we acknowledge the acts that inspired us to greater kindness. By recalling them, may we be moved to perform them, repeat them, to build on them, and to have them guide us toward a better existence. Keep us far from petty self-regard, from anger, impatience, despair, gossip, and all bad traits. Grant us the gift of seeing other people's merits and not their faults.
We thank you, our God, for the many opportunities we have for doing good, standing up for justice when we see another mistreated, remembering the good in others even when we are upset with them, expressing gratitude to those who help us, giving freely to tzedakah, to charity, financial acts of justice, apologizing to those we needlessly hurt, returning a found object to its owner, bringing comfort to the sick, helping others to find work, shelter, and their own strength, giving the gift of laughter, embracing change when it is good, and resisting change when it is bad. We sing together in the middle of page 157. B'tzuri Shalei Tzedek Avovam Hodaya. B'tzuri Shalei Tzedek Avovam Hodaya. Zeh like to invite the Havurah harmonists to join me in Ya'aleh, a piyut that asks that the spiritual work that we are doing this Yom Kippur will have tangible effects. And I'd like to invite Joel Sarfati to lead us in a prayer by Rabbi Yitzchak Luria.
Rabbeinu Shel Olam, I hereby forgive whoever has hurt me and whoever has done me any wrong, whether it was by deliberation or by accident, whether it was done by word or by deed, in this incarnation or in previous ones. May no one be punished on my account. May they all be your will, unknowing my God, God of my parents, that I sin no more, that I do not revert to my old ways, that I do not anger you anymore by my actions. May I not do that which is evil in your sight. Wipe away the sins that I have committed with your great compassion, but not through sickness or sufferings. May the words of my mouth and the prayers that are in my heart be acceptable before you, Adonai, my rock and my redeemer.
Asher Koach, page 159, in the middle of the page, we sing together. Ansha malach, ansha malach, oy ansha malach, ve'aguf alach, usan hara malach, oy ansha malach, ve'aguf alach, usan hara malach, ansha malach, ansha malach, oy ansha malach, ve'aguf alach, Chusa ala malach, Hoi hanshamalach, Vehaguf palach, Chusa ala malach. I'd like to invite Dick Frankel to lead the first, second, third, and final verses of As Clay in the Hand of the Potter with me.
Hine kachomer miyad hayotzer birtzoto machiv uvirtzoto mekatzer כן אנחנו בידיך חסד נוצר לברית הבית ואל תפן ליצר.
As clay in the hand of the potter, to be thickened or thinned, we are in your hands. Preserve us with your love. Remember your covenant, not our imperfection.
לברית הבית ואל תפן ליצר.
As stone in the hand of the mason to be broken or preserved, we are in your hands. Grant us strength. Remember your covenant, not our defects.
לברית הבית ואל תפן ליצר.
As iron in the hand of the blacksmith, to be thrust into fire or withdrawn, we are in your hands. Help us to forge our faith. Remember your covenant, not our weaknesses.
לברית הבית ואל תפן ליצר.
As silver in the hand of the smelter, to be fused among jewels or melted to a lump, we are in your hands. Let us shine with your brilliant light. Remember your covenant, not our deficiencies.
לברית הבית ואל תפן ליצר.
Yasher Koach. So we'll rise as we're able for Avinu Malkeinu, a prayer of honoring our deepest yearnings, our deepest hopes, and our deepest aspirations. Trying to believe that at this point, all of it is possible, and it's as possible as it could possibly be at this very moment.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu Vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu masim. Asei imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Asei imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu Vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu v'hanenu, ki ein banu ma'asim. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lefanecha.
Source of life, sovereign of the universe, we have done wrong in your presence.
Avinu Malkeinu, ein lanu melech ela ata.
Our source, our sovereign, we have no one to rule over us but you.
Avinu Malkeinu, asei imanu laman shemecha.
Our source, our sovereign, help us for the honor of your name.
Avinu Malkeinu, chadesh aleinu shana tova.
Our source, our sovereign, renew for us a good year.
Avinu Malkeinu, hafer atzat oyeveinu.
Our source, our sovereign, nullify the plans of any who may seek to do us harm.
Avinu Malkeinu, salach u'machal chol avonotenu.
Our source, our sovereign, grant forgiveness and atonement for all of our transgressions.
Avinu Malkeinu, hachazirenu b'tshuva shlema lefanecha.
Our source, our sovereign, help us to return wholeheartedly into your presence.
Avinu Malkeinu, shalach refuah shlema lecholim.
Our source, our sovereign, send complete healing to all those who ail.
Avinu Malkeinu, katvenu b'sefer chaim tovim.
Our source, our sovereign, inscribe us for good fortune in the book of life.
Avinu Malkeinu, katvenu b'sefer geula v'yeshua.
Our source, our sovereign, inscribe us in the book of redemption and salvation.
Avinu Malkeinu, katvenu b'sefer parnasa v'chalkala.
Our source, our sovereign, inscribe us in the book of sustenance and livelihood.
Avinu Malkeinu, katvenu b'sefer zechuyo.
Our source, our sovereign, inscribe us in the book of merit.
Avinu Malkeinu, katvenu b'sefer slicha u'mechila.
Our source, our sovereign, inscribe us in the book of forgiveness and atonement.
Avinu Malkeinu, hatzmach lani Yeshua b'karo.
Our source, our sovereign, let grow for us the tree of imminent redemption.
Avinu Malkeinu, zachor ki afar anachnu.
Our source, our sovereign, remember us, though we are made of dust.
Avinu Malkeinu, chamal aleinu v'al aleinu v'tapenu.
Our source, our sovereign, be merciful to us and to all our offspring.
Avinu Malkeinu, aseh laman harugim al shem kodshecha.
Our source, our sovereign, act in memory of all those who have been killed while honoring your name.
Avinu Malkeinu, aseh laman shimcha hagadol hagibor v'hanara shenikra aleinu.
Our source, our sovereign, act in honor of your great and mighty, awe-inspiring name, which has been called out over us for our protection.
Avinu Malkeinu, chanenu v'anenu. Avinu Malkeinu, chanenu v'anenu, ki ein banu ma'asim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, chanenu v'anenu. Avinu Malkeinu, chanenu v'anenu, ki ein banu ma'asim.
So normally I would say, go ahead and be seated, and this is when I would give my Devar Torah. Because of our technical issues, I want to make sure that we just get through the service. I think what we'll do is at the end of the service, after the mourner's Kaddish, you're welcome to go to bed, go relax, or you can stay, and maybe I'll give my Devar Torah then. and hopefully it can be recorded as well so that you can watch it later or read it later. And also, there will be an opportunity tomorrow afternoon for a discussion around it led by members of the Hill Havurah's Anti-Racism Task Force. So whether or not you stick around late tonight to hear it, you will be able to read the words and maybe even watch a video of it and even discuss it tomorrow with other folks. So let's remain standing for now, and we'll turn to page 164 for the Kaddish Titkabah. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ועמד יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי דרכו בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתעל ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו. לעילה ולעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בימה ואמרו אמן. תתקבל צאתנו ואותון דכל בית ישראל, קדם ובהון ובשמיא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבה מן שמיא וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו amen. We continue on page 165 with Aleinu. Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. We continue silently. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד. ושמו אחד. You may be seated. I'd like to invite our very own executive director, Alan Schusterman, and his wife, Gila, to lead us in a poem by Judy Chicago in the middle of page 167.
And then all that has divided us will merge.
And then compassion will be wedded to power.
And then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind.
And then both men and women will be gentle.
And then both women and men will be strong.
And then no person will be subject to another's will.
And then all will be rich and free and varied.
And then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many.
And then all will share equally in the earth's abundance.
And then all will care for the sick and the weak and the old.
And then all will nourish the young.
And then all will cherish life's creatures.
And
then all will live in harmony with each other and the earth. And then everywhere will be called Eden once again.
Yasher Koach. I now invite the chair of the board of directors of Hill Havurah, Marlene Singer, to provide us some announcements.
Shana Tova. On behalf of the Board of Directors of Havurah, I would like to wish you a Happy New Year. We hope to see all of you at our many services today, during Sukkot, and beyond. Yom Kippur services begin tomorrow at 10 a.m. Meditation with Rabbi Hannah is tomorrow at 1:30. Yom Kippur family service is at 3, and Yom Kippur Tot service is at 4. Yizkor begins at 5:30, and Ne'ilah, the closing service, begins at 6. Have an easy fast. Gmar Chatima Tova. May you all be inscribed for a year of health and happiness.
Thank you so much, Marlene. And I'll just add and reiterate one thing, which is that we'll also have a discussion group meeting at 3:30 if you'd like to join some members of the Havurah's Anti-Racism Task Force discussing the sermon that I'll give in just a moment. But for now, we'll begin to turn our thoughts to our loved ones whose memories we hold so much closer this time of year, if that's possible. And so I'd like to invite Scott and Phyllis Schlesinger to lead us on page 168 in a responsive reading.
We remember them. At the rising of the sun and its setting, we remember them.
Together, at the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them.
At the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them.
At the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember them.
At the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them.
At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them, for they are now a part of us as we remember them.
When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them.
When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them.
When we have joy we crave to share, we remember them.
When we have decisions that are difficult to make,
we remember them. When we have achievements that are based on theirs, we remember them. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them.
Yasher Koach. At this time, I invite everyone who would like to share the name or names of the folks you're thinking about right now, the folks who you're remembering with the Mourner's Kaddish, to put their names in the comments of the live stream. I know many folks in our community have suffered recent losses, and also for so many people, this is a time when we think back to loved ones who passed on more than a year or many years ago. So please put those names in the live stream comments. If you're in mourning or observing a yard site, please rise if you're able. If it's your custom to rise for the Mourner's Kaddish, please do so. We'll all be there in body or in spirit on page 169 for the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ve'alma divrach yutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uvyomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala uvizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'al v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadal v'yitalev v'yithalal shemei dekudesha richu. Le'ela u'le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechamata d'amiran ve'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru. Amen. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for a blessing. You may be seated, and we'll conclude our service singing together words of peace, the last two lines on that page.
Oseh shalom bimromav, Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imhu, Imhu, Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael.
All, thank you so much for being a part of this evening. Thank you especially for your patience during our technical difficulties, for your beautiful words in the chat box, your amazing encouragement. To Andrew Logan and Alan Schusterman and Danny Tamaris for working so hard behind the scenes to keep everything going. To my wonderful co-leader, Michael Allen. If you're signing off now, have a safe fast, if you're able to fast, and a meaningful evening. And we'll see each other tomorrow at 10 a.m. Laila Tov. And if you're sticking around, I'd love to share with you some thoughts that I had this evening, which will also be posted later in case you are exhausted. It's after 9 and want to sign off. But if you're sticking around, imagine yourself in this Zoom room. During a time of intensive protesting, police response, and unrest, Grace, who's Black, shares thoughts about how good it feels that more and more folks are getting behind the Black Lives Matter movement. Kelly, who's white, interrupts her on the verge of tears. She shares with everyone that she wants to make sure they know that she was tear-gassed protesting last night and that it's been really hard on her emotionally. Grace replies bluntly that while she's grateful that Kelly is part of this movement isn't about her, and she chose to be there at the protest. Grace goes on to say that countless Black folks have experienced violence and death at the hands of police just going about their own business. Walking down the street and getting lynched. That's what this movement is about, not voluntary protesters getting tear-gassed. Grace emphasized that she embraced Kelly's part in the movement, but that Kelly can't be making the conversation about herself. So what would you do if you were Kelly? And what would you do if you were one of the other people on the Zoom? Here's what happened in real life to my friend who I'm calling Grace. A bunch of folks private chatted her, saying things like, "You're so right, it was totally wrong of Kelly to make this about her, and way to go for telling it like it is, so brave and important," etc. I imagine they felt like they'd supported Grace in her truth-telling, an important Jewish value, truth, and avoided embarrassing Kelly, another important Jewish value. Meanwhile, Grace had nobody publicly back her up and feels alone in a tangible way. After she spoke, there was radio silence on the call. Kelly ended up apologizing to Grace several days later, but I remember how upset Grace was when this first happened. During an incredibly difficult week for so many Black Americans around the country, Grace was asked to comfort and publicly appreciate Kelly. That just wasn't right, and so she spoke up. In 21st century American English, folks might say that Grace called Kelly out. But Grace actually used a different phrase when she told me the story. She said she'd called her in because she'd tried to frame her critique within welcome to be part of the movement, but pointed clarification around what the movement was about. In Hebrew, we might say that Grace gave Kelly tochacha, or rebuke. And if you think that call-outs and their less well-known cousin, call-ins, have been a major topic of discussion in the last few years, you should see all the ink that's been spilled over the ages on tochacha. It all starts about halfway through the Torah with Leviticus 19:17. The Israelites are commanded, "You shall not hate your kinfolk in your heart. You shall surely rebuke your kinsmen, but incur no guilt because of them." So there are 3 parts to the mitzvah of tochacha, rebuke. Don't hate them, rebuke them, and don't let it be your unwillingness to jump in that makes the situation continue. Of course, these are related. Don't just sit there holding a grudge. Tell it like it is. And also, if you just sit there being resentful but never let them know what they did wrong, they'll keep on doing it. And then that's sort of, kind of, a little bit your fault, isn't it? Throughout the ages, Jewish thinkers have underscored the importance of this mitzvah to give tochacha, to rebuke. In Breshit Rabbah, a contemporary midrash of the Talmud, Rabbi Hanina teaches us that love unaccompanied by reproof is not true love. And in the Talmud itself, Rabbi Hanina teams up with 3 other rabbis to teach that whoever can prevent their household from committing a sin but doesn't is liable for the sins of their household. And if they can prevent their fellow citizens from committing a sin but don't, they are liable for the sins of their fellow citizens. And if they can prevent the whole world from sinning but don't, they're liable for the sins of the whole world. Tochacha, rebuke, is a way we show our love for one another and of taking responsibility for making the world a better place. So why does call-out culture have a bad reputation? It's not for nothing. Probably the biggest reason is that, especially as Jews, we know that embarrassing another person is a big, big problem. The Talmud teaches us in Bava Metzia 58b that when you publicly shame your neighbor, it's as if you've shed blood. And getting called out is incredibly embarrassing. Sure enough, Maimonides, a key medieval Torah commentator, tells us that one should give tochacha in private, speaking to the offender gently and tenderly, and pointing out that the rebuke is offered for the wrongdoer's own good. He goes on to teach that no person may humiliate anyone, even more so in public, whether of low or high social status. For Maimonides, not only is it problematic to shame someone with less power than you, it's not even acceptable to punch up publicly, so to speak, and humiliate someone who wields a great deal of power in full view. Give feedback, yes, but not humiliate. Politicians and police chiefs are people too. For those of us who want deeply to criticize and draw public focus to the deeds of local and national leaders in whom we're disappointed or even horrified, that's a hard line to toe. But a related Jewish thought on tochacha might help us figure out the balance. A couple of different times in the Talmud it says, leave people alone. Don't tell them when they're breaking a rule if you know they're not going to change their ways. Quote, it's better that they be unwitting sinners and not intentional sinners. If we're giving tochacha in a way that we don't expect to be effective, why are we giving it? We need to figure out a way to make our tochacha, our rebuke, the sort of words that someone can actually take in. Grace believed that Kelly cared enough about anti-racist work to listen to her. And Grace hoped that her words, while pointed and critical, would be respectful enough not to embarrass. So she tried calling Kelly in to the possibility of a change in perspective. It was painful. The Zoom call shook up both women, but it just might have made an important difference for Kelly's activism and for the mindsets of the other folks who had been on the Zoom. Grace refused to just sit there resenting Kelly for her interruption and redirection. Instead, she showed her love by giving Kelly clear, respectful tochacha that made room for positive change. And so, in that same vein of love, and with the trust that we are all capable of positive change, I want to bring up some tochacha I've been learning about that pertains to the Jewish community as a whole. Many of you might be exhausted by what I have to say, either because you've been thinking about it a lot yourself lately, or because you've lived your whole life dealing with these issues in a way that I can't even begin to understand. But I do believe these words are worth saying, because for many of us, maybe even for most of us, we still have not thought enough about them. There's a myth I've heard rolling around the Jewish world for so many years that Jews can't be racist, or never are, because we've been through so much ourselves. There's another connected myth that the Jewish community has done so much work over the years to fight for social justice and civil rights, so everyone should know and trust that we are not racist. As if no Jews enslaved Black people in the American South. As if no Jews supported Jim Crow laws back in the day, or tolerate mass incarceration and police brutality today. The idea that all Jews are necessarily free of racism and racist acts is not just false, it's harmful, because it gets in our way. It stalls and distracts us from making critical changes in our communities. If you stop and think about it with me, I hope you'll realize that in many ways, we as a people have been actively racist. We pride ourselves in being approachable, kind, and welcoming communities. But a quick Google search will unearth countless stories of Jews of color sitting down for Shabbat dinner at a Chabad or a Passover Seder at their Hillel, only to be given the most doubtful looks and questions that imply some serious uncertainty that they know what they're doing. You'll find stories upon stories of Jews of color being asked about their conversions, which, by the way, is not a kosher question according to the Talmud, or their family backgrounds. You'll even find stories, so many of them, of Jews of color being interrogated about what they're doing in the very communities in which they should be able to feel the most at home. That pointed questioning, that sense of ownership of other people's stories, that not so subtle insinuation that fellow Jews don't belong, that would be bad enough. But that's not even all that goes on. We all shake our heads when disgraced politicians' old blackface pictures get unearthed. But how many of us have seen blackface or something similar but just not involving face paint at a Purim party over the years and said nothing? At first glance, it may seem small compared to the horrors of violence against Black lives in our country, but I can't imagine that the sort of culture that allows for the one might not eventually enable the other. I'm nervous to focus on this tochacha tonight for a few reasons. First, I know that even though anti-racism is an important part of my life and thinking, I'm not blameless on this front. And second, I know that a lot of you listening have been in this fight much longer than me, so who am I to be telling you about it all? And third, many of you listening are Jews of color yourselves, and my words may very well be landing for you as simply exhausting and not what you needed for your Kol Nidrei, or woefully lacking in some way. I'm sure they are woefully lacking in some way. Part of that lack has got to be this double bind. I strongly believe that white people like myself have to be talking about white supremacy and struggling toward anti-racism regularly and openly. And I strongly believe that these statements made by white people are always going to leave out important nuance, experience, and perspective. Perhaps the biggest piece of tochacha that I've received on this topic and have been working on is that in every fight for justice in which we find ourselves, we must centralize the voices of the people most impacted. And yet, when white folks like me rely on people of color to guide every step of the anti-racist journey for us, we're abdicating our own responsibility. I'm incredibly grateful for the anti-racism task force of the Hill Havurah and the work that they're preparing to do. I know that they're guided by that principle of centralizing the voices of people directly impacted by racism. And I'm also very grateful that their members will be holding space for a discussion on these words and the questions that it brings up tomorrow afternoon over Zoom. So I hope that if these words are bringing up ideas or feelings for you of any sort, and if spending time connecting with folks to share those feelings and ideas would be helpful for your own Kippur, that you'll consider joining in. It might be worth taking a moment to just think back to a time when we've given tochacha around racism or racial justice, recently or not. A time when we've given tochacha on these issues. And it might also be worth taking a moment to think back to a time when we've been on the receiving end of it. In these instances, how was the tochacha given? How was it received? What was its effect? And if we're having trouble thinking of any of these, if we've never personally been a part of tochacha on these issues in any way, it may be worth thinking about why. Is it because we're more surrounded by calling out that humiliates rather than calling in that invites? Is it because the calling out lacks the focus of love and of respectfully, clearly partnering with the person who made a mistake? Is it because we've been afraid to be in places where real loving rebuke, real tochacha, is allowed to emerge at all? What's the kind of work that we can do to ready ourselves to give and receive that kind of tochacha? How do we need to see ourselves in relationship to others in order for us to effectively be a part of relationships that lovingly rebuke? Tochacha can be painful, but it's commanded of us. It's a mitzvah of love, of taking care, and of responsibility. May we all have the courage to go there this fall and beyond. Gamar Chatima Tova. And now I will wish you all a Laila Tov, a good night. If you stuck around with me this late, you are lovely and I appreciate you. And if you want to write anything in the chat box, I'm here for a few more minutes. But I guess the live stream should end for recording purposes, shouldn't it? I don't know. I see what you're writing now. Thank you so much. I hope you'll join in tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for the service. And thank you again to everybody who played a role in this service in all the different ways that were necessary. Moral support during the fact and everything else. Gemar Chatima Tova and Laila Tov.